Hi everyone, I'm Anita Sharma and you are watching AnewZ live from Baku. Here's what's making news right now. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk says peace talks about the war in Ukraine could start this winter. Mohammed al-Bashir, a low-profile former governor in rebel-held northwest Syria, will be the country's interim leader. The Nobel Prize award ceremonies take place in Oslo and Stockholm. We begin with peace talks concerning the war in Ukraine, which could start this winter. That's according to the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk. French President Emmanuel Macron is expected in Warsaw this Thursday for a debrief about the conversations he had with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky over the past weekend.
Ukraine peace talks possible this winter, says Poland's Prime Minister. Donald Tusk outlined a series of planned meetings as Warsaw seeks to play a leading role in ending the conflict. Warsaw would be heavily involved in any talks when it takes up the European Union's rotating presidency on January 1st next year.
Będę miał serię rozmów dotyczących przede wszystkim sytuacji.
As you can imagine, our delegation will be co-responsible for, among other things, what the political calendar will look like. Perhaps what the situation will be like during the negotiations, which may, although there is still a question mark, start in the winter of this year.
Być może, tu są ciągle znaki zapytania, rozpoczną się.
Poland's Prime Minister also said French President Emmanuel Macron would visit Warsaw on Thursday to give a rundown on talks with US President-elect Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Paris last weekend. During the meeting, leaders discussed the war and possible steps toward peace. They also talked about keeping the West united against Russia and continuing support for Ukraine. These diplomatic efforts show a stronger focus on ending the war and bringing stability to the region. The Kremlin said on Tuesday the war would continue until the goals set by Putin were achieved by military action or through negotiation.
To Syria now, where the rebels in power named Mohammed al-Bashir, a low-profile former governor in the rebel-held northwestern part of the country, as the head of a transitional government after President Bashar al-Assad was overthrown Sunday.
New caretaker Prime Minister of Syria, Mohammed al-Bashir, pledged to oversee Syria's transition until March 1st. Known for governing a rebel enclave in northwest Syria, al-Bashir said his administration is working with remnants of the Salvation government and the previous government to ensure a smooth handover of institutions. Meanwhile, the presidential palace in Damascus, a long-standing symbol of Assad's governance, is now under rebel control. Rebels inspected the building, leaving graffiti reading down with Bashar al-Assad on the walls and the Syrian flag on the ground. Rebel leader Abu Musab al-Halabi called for a smooth transfer of power to stabilize the capital. As Damascus sees banks and shops reopening, the streets are clearing of heavy rebel presence, with local police taking over security. The transition marks the start of efforts to rebuild governance and normality after years of conflict.
Israel plans to impose a, quote, sterile defense zone in the southern part of Syria. Its defense minister, Israel Katz, would not offer any more details except to say that it would, quote, prevent the establishment and organization of terror in Syria and that it will be enforced without a permanent Israeli presence. Meantime, an Israeli spokesperson says its forces are still in the demilitarized zone near the Syrian border and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, with a few exceptions in the vicinity of the buffer zone. According to the Israeli military, its forces are not advancing towards Damascus and that they are only focused on border protection and keeping strategic weapons out of the hands of hostile groups. Many questions are now being raised about the political future of Syria and how this could impact geopolitics both regionally and around the world. But there are also countless personal tragedies as families mourn the loss of loved ones. Here's a story now of one family's devastating loss. As Syria continues to endure its devastating conflict, the toll on its people grows heavier each day. Akram Shalbout, a father in Jordan, mourns the loss of his son Mustafa, killed in a strike on Homs. The strike is one of many in this ongoing conflict, which continues to escalate as rebel forces advance across the country. The father was overwhelmed with grief when he heard the news of his son Mustafa's death, just minutes after warning him not to visit the village due to ongoing bombings.
I told them, son, don't go. There's a lot of bombings and the village is in a mess. There's bombing here, a bombing there, and the situation is a mess.
Shalbout, who has lived in Jordan for the past decade, said his son had chosen to remain in Syria with his wife and daughter on the outskirts of Homs. Reflecting on his son's death, Shalbout shared the pain of not seeing him for 13 years.
When he was martyred, the sadness was because it's been 13 years that I have not seen him. That's it, he is martyred. May he rest in peace. I can't bring him back. The crying of his siblings made us forget Syria and the regime. When the news of the regime's fall came, the joy wasn't overwhelming. Truly, when they announced the fall of the regime, the mother of Mustafa said, I no longer care about all of Syria.
Meanwhile, Syrian rebels stormed Damascus Sunday, seizing the capital and forcing President Bashar al-Assad to flee to Russia. As the conflict continues to devastate families like Shalbout's, the emotional and human cost of the war is felt deeply across the country. Following the fall of Assad's government, several European countries, including Germany, the UK, and those in the Balkans, suspend Syrian asylum applications. That leaves thousands in limbo as governments reassess their policies amid Syria's uncertain future.
The collapse of Assad's regime has created a climate of deep uncertainty over Syria's future, leaving governments across Europe struggling to adapt to a rapidly changing landscape. Sweden, Germany, Austria, Denmark, Norway and the Netherlands, as well as the UK, all posed asylum applications this week as they reassess the political situation in Syria. France is also set to follow suit, working to halt current cases in light of the rapidly changing circumstances. Countries in the Balkan region, such as Croatia and Greece, have also halted further examination of asylum applications for Syrian refugees. Meanwhile, Turkey has opened its borders, allowing refugees to return home, signaling a significant shift in migration patterns. With many nations pausing the processing of new asylum claims and re-evaluating pending requests, thousands of Syrians face an uncertain future as European countries grapple with how to revise their policies in response to the shifting situation in Syria.
Meantime, the Netherlands expands and extends border controls for 6 months. That will affect land and air travel within the Schengen zone. The decision is part of a broader effort to tackle illegal immigration following similar measures in neighboring Germany.
The Dutch government has introduced stricter border controls starting December 9th. The new controls, set to last for 6 months, aims to curb illegal immigration as part of a package of measures proposed by the right-wing PVV party. This allows Germany's move in September to suspend parts of the Schengen Agreement for the same purpose. The Dutch government is also tightening asylum policies, including limiting asylum permits to 3 years and restricting family reunification for asylum seekers. Minister of Asylum and Migration Marjolein Faber emphasized that the extended mandate for border checks will allow Dutch authorities to manage migration more effectively.
There are always people who always have a reason not to do something, but I won't be deterred. We're taking those measures because I want that inflow to go down, and this is one of the measures to start achieving that, and I will not let that stop me. I have confidence in the Marashus. They are working efficiently. In fact, we work in the same way as our German counterparts.
Despite opposition from some groups, the Dutch government remains determined to implement its migration policies.
The president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, spoke with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan over the phone. The leaders discussed bilateral relations, including their growing strategic alliance. Baku's success in hosting COP29 was another key point. The heads of state also exchanged views about the latest developments in Syria, as well as regional and global issues. President Aliyev expressed hope that Syria would return to peace and that Turkey's support will aid Syria's stability. Former U.S. Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, now a Republican supporter of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, is nominated by him to head U.S. intelligence. Known for her controversial views on Syria, Iran, and Ukraine, her nomination sparked significant debate as well as criticism about her suitability for this crucial role.
Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democratic Congresswoman who joined the Republican Party to back Donald Trump in October, is now the president-elect's hand-picked choice for the position of Director of National Intelligence. Described as a superwoman by the Russian news agency RIA Novosti, known for her past appearances on Russian TV and self-admittedly being claimed as a probable agent of the Russian special services by the Ukrainian intelligence, Gabbard's nomination has raised accusations that she has in the past amplified narratives supporting Moscow's rhetoric over the war in Ukraine and Syria. Having no prior experience in the field, Gabbard's prospective new role, if confirmed, would authorize her to oversee 18 intelligence agencies, including the CIA, FBI, and the National Security Agency, and manage a budget of more than $70 billion. Gabbard's past records, initiatives and statements are now referred to by her critics questioning the judiciousness of her nomination for a critical post, with the Democrats claiming that her comments signify a pro-Russian bent that poses a problem for U.S. national security if she is confirmed by the Senate. In November 2015, Gabbard, then the incumbent Democratic representative, introduced a subsequently botched legislation to block U.S. military action against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Being extremely critical of the opposition rebel forces of Syria's civil war, Gabbard claimed that Hezbollah, Russia and Iran had been working towards defeating America's common enemy, describing the conflict itself as a war waged between terrorists under the command of groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the government of Bashar al-Assad. In March 2016, she was one of the 3 members of the Congress to vote against House Resolution 121, which condemned the government of Syria and other parties to the conflict for war crimes and crimes against humanity, stating that although Assad was a brutal dictator, the resolution was a thinly veiled attempt to use humanitarianism as a justification for overthrowing the Syrian government. After having 2 unplanned meetings with the Syrian leader during a trip to Syria and Lebanon in January 2017, Gabbard made statements perceived by some as an endorsement for the government in Damascus, suggesting that the chemical against civilians might have been perpetrated by opposition forces for the purpose of drawing the US and the West deeper into the war. On Iran, Gabbard is known for her continuous opposition to the Trump administration's decision to withdraw from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, imposing restraints on Tehran's nuclear program in exchange of lifting nuclear-related sanctions against it. In January 2022, still a Democrat, she heavily criticized the assassination of Iran's Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani, describing this as an act of war against Tehran with no congressional approval. Gabbard also expressed her support for another Russian ally, Armenia, during its war with Azerbaijan in 2020. Earlier in 2017, she was part of a team of U.S. lawmakers who visited Armenia and Azerbaijan's internationally recognized Karabakh region, then under the control of separatist groups, propped up Yerevan, in turn backed by Moscow. What is the most controversial about President-elect Trump's choice to lead the U.S. intelligence services is her, as what many critics suggest, pro-Russian statements in the context of the war in Ukraine. Gabbard remains very critical of American assistance for Ukraine, viewing the support given to Kiev as jeopardizing global security by antagonizing Russia. Back in 2022, she claimed as too the existence of dozens of US-funded biolabs working on some of the world's nastiest pathogens in Ukraine. In the past, Gabbard portrayed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as corrupt.
In Israel, protests erupted outside a Tel Aviv courthouse as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu testified for the very first time in his long-running corruption trial. Despite last-minute efforts to delay proceedings, he took the stand, dismissing allegations of corruption as, quote, simply ridiculous.
Demonstrations flared outside the district court in Tel Aviv as Benjamin Netanyahu made his first appearance on the witness stand in his corruption trial. Crowds demanded accountability, while Netanyahu maintained his innocence, calling the charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust baseless. In court, Netanyahu greeted a packed gallery before testifying. He claimed he had always intended to address the allegations but was delayed by Israel's multiple security challenges, referencing the wars in Gaza and Lebanon. Footage of the courtroom shows the Israeli leader mingling with attendees before calling the accusations simply ridiculous. Netanyahu, on trial since 2020, faces mounting scrutiny, with critics accusing him of exploiting national security issues to deflect from legal troubles. Despite calls for his resignation, Prime Minister remains in office under Israeli law unless convicted by the Supreme Court. As the legal and political turmoil deepens, opposition leaders and international organizations, including the International Criminal Court, continue to scrutinize Netanyahu's leadership amid allegations of war crimes.
Russia is one step closer to recognizing Afghanistan's Taliban government. On Tuesday, the State Duma held a vote approving a bill in its initial reading that aims to remove the Taliban from Moscow's list of banned terrorist organizations. The bill must pass 2 or more readings for full approval. Russian President Vladimir Putin previously stated in July that he sees the Taliban as an ally in the fight against terrorism. Moscow has expressed concerns about militant groups operating in Afghanistan and the Middle East, citing them as significant security threats. Meantime, Russia faced a major setback in the region this week with the ousting of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, one of Moscow's key allies in the Middle East. Western diplomats, however, emphasize that the Taliban's chances of gaining international recognition remain slim unless they change their stance on women's rights. The group has restricted women's and girls' access to education and prohibited them from traveling without a male guardian. Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh meets his Russian counterpart Andrei Belousov in Moscow. Singh reaffirms India's commitment to enhancing close ties with Russia, while Belousov emphasizes that Russia is satisfied with the high level of military cooperation between the two countries. In the U.S., Luigi Mangione, the suspect in the fatal shooting of United Health CEO Brian Thompson in New York, is arraigned and charged with murder. Mangione was arrested at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, ending a 5-day manhunt. Authorities found a loaded ghost gun, fake identifications, and documents indicating potential motives of hostility toward corporate America. Prosecutors argued Mangione is a flight risk and he was denied bail. Pennsylvania's governor condemned any glorification of the suspect. Mangione is charged with murder of the medical insurance giant CEO and 4 other counts, including firearms charges. In South Korea, lawmakers passed a special council bill to enable an investigation into President Yoon Suk-yeol's short-lived declaration of martial law. The parliament's move comes just 3 days after the president survived an impeachment vote.
South Korea's parliament has launched an investigation into President Yoon Suk-yeol's brief declaration of martial law on December 3, a move widely criticized as unconstitutional. Martial law, typically reserved for extreme emergencies, was lifted just 6 hours after being imposed, sparking political turmoil across the nation. The special council bill, passed with 210 votes in favor, aims to uncover the events leading to this unprecedented decision. President Yoon and several senior officials now face treason charges and are under a travel ban. Prime Minister Han Duck-seo and intelligence officials have been summoned for questioning, while former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun, detained for treason, missed a court hearing on Tuesday. The opposition bloc, which failed to impeach Yoon last week, plans another vote. Meanwhile, ruling party members are reportedly considering Yoon's resignation, potentially triggering early elections.
Nobel Prize ceremonies take place in Oslo and Stockholm, with global leaders and distinguished guests honoring this year's laureates. The Nobel Peace Prize ceremony took place at Oslo City Hall, an historic venue known for its long-standing tradition. This year's Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Nihon Hidankyo, a Japanese organization founded in 1956. The organization, which represents the survivors of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, is committed to abolishing nuclear weapons and promoting a world free of nuclear threats. Terumi Tanaka, a survivor of the Nagasaki bombing, spoke about the ongoing threat of nuclear weapons and the critical need for disarmament.
いつ被害者になってもおかしくない、あるいは加害者になるかもしれない。
Our movement has undoubtedly played a major role in creating the nuclear taboo. However, there still remain 12,000 nuclear warheads on Earth today, 4,000 of which are operationally deployed, ready for immediate launch. The nuclear superpower, Russia, threatens to use nuclear weapons in its war against Ukraine, and a cabinet member of Israel, amidst its unrelenting attacks on Gaza and Palestine, even spoke of the possible use of nuclear arms. In addition to the civilian casualties, I'm infinitely saddened and angered that the nuclear taboo threatens to be broken.
Meanwhile, in Stockholm, the Nobel Prizes in Medicine, Physics, Chemistry, Literature, and Economic Sciences are presented at a ceremony in the concert hall. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to Victor Ambros and Gary Ruvkun. The scientists discovered microRNA, a new class of tiny RNA molecules that play a crucial role in gene regulation. The 2024 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences was awarded to Darren Acemoglu, Simon Johnson, and James A. Robinson for their studies of how institutions are formed and affect prosperity.
The correct word would probably be very interested in everything that has to do with African.
The Nobel Prize in Physics was presented to John J. Hopfield and Jeffrey E. Hinton for foundational discoveries and inventions that enable machine learning with artificial neural networks. The 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded with one half to David Baker for computational protein design and the other half jointly to Demis Hazzapis and John M. Jumper for protein structure prediction. The Nobel Prize ceremonies in Oslo and Stockholm today showcase the remarkable achievements of this year's laureates, whose contributions to peace, science, and the betterment of humanity continue to inspire global progress. Google says it has overcome a key challenge in quantum computing with a new generation chip solving a computing problem in just 5 minutes that would take a classical computer more time than the history of the universe.
Like other tech giants such as Microsoft and International Business Machines, Alphabet's Google is chasing quantum computing because it promises computing speeds far faster than today's fastest systems. While the math problem solved by the company's Santa Barbara, California Quantum Lab does not have commercial applications, Google hopes quantum computers will one day solve problems in medicine, battery chemistry, and artificial intelligence that are out of reach for today's computers. The results released Monday came from a new chip called Willow that has 105 qubits, which are the building blocks of quantum computers. Qubits are fast but error-prone because they can be jostled by something small as a subatomic particle from events in outer space. As more qubits are packed onto a chip, those errors can add up to make the chip no better than a conventional computer chip. So since the 1990s, scientists have been working on quantum error correction. In a paper published in the journal Nature on Monday, Google said that it has found a way to string together the Willow chip's qubits so that error rates go down as the number of qubits go up. The company also says it can correct errors in real time, a key step forward making its quantum machines practical.
That's all from our team here at ANewZ. Thank you so much for watching. Stay up to date by visiting our website, anewz.tv. Bye for now.